So that's it. Every time we pull the lever, we get a loaded round out. We have to come in here like this, and it's kind of awkward from this angle, and put a bullet and a case into place. And then when we stroke, each time we get a loaded round. And this is the 40 Smith & Wesson. So let me show you what's actually going on here. If we compare an unfired case to a fired case over here, the obvious difference is that one of them has a bullet and the other one doesn't. But there's more to it than that. The case that has the bullet in it also has powder. And the other thing is that the primer, as you can see here, has been hit and expended, whereas on the unfired case, the primer is still intact. So we have a bullet that we have to put into place, some powder, and we have to replace the primer. And then there's one other major thing we have to do, and that is adjust the size of the case. If you recall, with our little case gauge that we've used in the past, when you have a properly loaded round, it'll drop down in there like so, and that represents the chamber of the gun. So this thing is a nice perfect fit in there. On the other hand, the unfired case, I hope this will work, won't go no matter how hard I push it. It's too big. So what's happened is, in the process of firing this thing, it's expanded in all directions so that the diameter of the case is now too big. And what we're going to do is we're going to process that case so as to make it where it will be the correct size. And then there's one other thing. The bullet is supposed to be held firmly in the case, but as you can see here, it will slide in with just my finger pressure, which I may not be able to get it out now. Yeah, there it goes. And so obviously that would not do at all to have a bullet that can be pushed down into the case. Start over. So here's the bullet, and we'll push it. It just goes right on down in there. Well, that's not good at all. Pop and pull it out. So we've got to change the diameter of this thing to make it the proper size so that it will chamber and so that it will properly grip the bullet. And that's our first step, and it's called resizing. So what we have is a case that's too big, still has a primer in it, and the diameter of it is too big to fit back in and so forth. So what we want to do is squeeze it down, and the best way to do that is to find something that has a hole in it that's the right size, and then force this thing into it. I can't do it with my fingers, that's for sure, but you can see how that's a really tight fit. Now, let me show you down inside here. I'll get a little reflection of this Q-tip, and you can see that there is a ring that extends down in there. You can kind of see the edge of it there. It goes in about maybe half an inch, maybe. And that ring is made out of polished tungsten carbide, and it's very, very hard. The cartridge can go way on down past it, and once it gets past it, nothing's happening. But in that spot, right up there near the top where you can see the reflection, that's where it's resizing it. It's squeezing it down to that diameter if we somehow manage to force this thing up into it. And that's what we'll do. So we'll do a little handheld camera work here. Here is the case. It will not go any further. If I push it any more, it's going to be jammed. into the gauge, which represents the chamber of the gun. Now we'll take this case and we'll come over here and we'll put it into the press, and you see there's a slot where it goes, and down below where this lever is, it's got a lot of leverage in this thing. So when we pull on that lever and it pushes this post up and down, and it pushes this whole thing up and down, believe me, it's got a lot of power. Now what we're going to do is push it up, and if you see, it's, I apologize for the shaking there. As you see, it's going up inside of that die that resizes it, and it is a tight fit. I need to push it up in there. It's a tight fit, and there it goes up in there. And now if I back off and I push really hard, okay, that got it. Now I'll pull down here, take it out, and come over here. I didn't do any trickery there, and you see how that goes down inside. So that's what that die does, is it resizes the case. Now what about the primer? It would sure be nice if we could get rid of the primer at the same time, and it turns out that we can, because there's a primer punch which has a nice little tip on the end that we can insert down into this die like so, and screw it down into place. And then that tip, see, will come out down here at the bottom. And so when that case goes up in there, let me tighten that with a wrench, I hope. Let's see what these guys are talking about, trying to do these one-handed videos. It's not as easy as it looks. Okay, so now we'll come back down here and take our case and slide it into the slot and bring it up, and I'm going to let you listen, and you may see it come down through that clear tube, but listen. You get a little tick. Anyway, that was it, and it came down and it fell into this jar full of old primers, and I can show you right here the primer is gone. So step one, we have removed the old primer, and we have, as Dizzy Dean would say, we've squoze it down so that it's the right size and will fit the chamber. So that's step one. Step two is pretty straightforward. Right on up in there. That's the process of adding a new primer. And it's going to be easier if I show you what happens first without the thing. And if you look down right there, you can see this little tray that has a primer in it. And those primers are being fed from this tube. You'll be able to see it. That thing will come around, and as we get to the bottom, see how it pushes up? There's the primer down there at the bottom. Come around to the other side. If we operate the thing, when we push down, the primer is pushed up into the little shell holder area, so that anything that's sitting there is going to have a primer forced up into it. You can also see on the other side of it a pin that comes through that locks everything into alignment. But that's how your primer gets into place. It's operated through this little deal that slides it, feeds it out of the tube, and then pushes it up in there, so when the case comes around, it gets fed into it. We'll do it here. So here's our case. It goes up, it gets resized. We've already done it, so I'll just skip that. And then we just push forward on the press handle, And then, I'll take my word for it, it has a primer in it. It's been pushed in from underneath. So here's our case that's been prepared so far. It's been squeezed down to the correct diameter so it fits into the chamber. It has a primer put into it so it will fire and we'll get a good flame out of it. We've got a problem though. When we squeeze them down like that, the bullet now won't go into it. I mean, it's just no way. If we tried to press that bullet into it, it would buckle the thing, it would collapse it. So what we've got to do is flare the end of it just slightly, kind of creating a little mini funnel shape right here at the end, right at the mouth, so that the bullet then can be started by hand and then finished by the machine. And we've got a die for that. In this case, the die is a loose fit. I mean, there's just the die itself doesn't do anything. It's just a body to do it. The work will be done, and again, I'm demonstrating with a 45 here, but the operation is exactly the same. The trick is to have the stem, which you I hope can see right here at the point where it gets darker. It's let's see if we can get this down a little bit better. It's tapered. Yeah, you can see it there. And the case will go onto it. I'm really having to kind of push it pretty hard with my fingers, but I can slide it on there with my fingers up to that point, and that's it. I can't do it by hand any further, but you can see what's going to happen at this point. Once it goes a little bit further, it's going to flare that end, that mouth of the cartridge, so that the bullet will have a tiny funnel there to start it into place. And that's okay, that's on there tight. I have to pull it with pliers, but at any rate, you see how that works. So that's called the expander, case expander, case neck expander, and you got to have that for all pistol cartridges. The die for expanding is right here. This first die with the stem is the one that resized the case and deprimed it. Then we add the primer down below this one, and when we go up, we're going to go up inside this die with this case, and it will flare it enough that the bullet will start. Now, let's just show what it is we're trying to accomplish. Get a bullet, and we try to get it to go in there. Where is it? There it is. And it's not going to do it. I promise you. It is the same. It's the same size as the case, and you might get it to balance up on there, but it would crush that case if you put pressure on it at that point. So what we'll do is we'll take this case and we'll put it into the machine. We'll run it up enough to get it to cycle over, come down, and then we're going to come up. Let's see, can you see it? You just have to take my word for it. It's going up inside that die. It takes very little effort of the press to accomplish that. And then that puts it around over here on the side where I can get it out. And now, let's see, hopefully there will be a dramatic difference. I set this thing up there on it, and it just sits right there fine. Because there's a tiny flare, which you can see. I don't know. I don't think it shows. You can feel it actually better than you can see it. But I promise you, the case, see, I can actually get it to stick in there just a little bit like that. Just barely. I mean, it's not very much. So we've done that. And So the case now has been done. It has been resized, it's been deprimed, it's been reprimed, and the mouth of it has been flared. So we're ready to put our powder into it. This is a can of powder that I'm using for the 40 Smith & Wesson. It's a SR 4756. It's not a very common powder, but a lot of people like it very much, especially for heavier bullets, and it creates a different kind of feel when you shoot it. I use it 9mm too. In fact, I think some of those things we were shooting at the farm were loaded with this. But anyway, it's a typical gunpowder in that it's like a little flake-looking thing. Let's see if I can get a little bit out. Most of it's already been put into the powder measure, but I don't know if you can see it or not. It consists of tiny little flakes, the little round, flat flakes. Yeah, I think you can see it there. And that's real common for gunpowder. That's a flake type powder, and that's very common for shotgun powders and pistol powders. How we put the powder in the case is to use this, and this is called a powder measure, and it operates like so. What happens is, in this drum at the upper end of this here is a cavity. I was hoping you could see the cavity, and I don't think you can, but I'll show it to you. If you look down there at the bottom, when I rotate it, you may see that dark section appear and disappear, but I don't think so. At any rate, there's a hole bored all the way through this cylinder here. It goes all the way through, and it's plugged off with this adjustment screw. So as you turn that adjustment screw in there, it plugs more or less of it off, and thus you can adjust the depth of the hole. That hole in this position is lined up so that the powder is falling into it. But when you rotate it, the smooth cylinder here, the body of the cylinder, cuts it off so no powder can go through, and it rotates what's in that cavity and drops it out right there. So you have, theoretically, the same amount drops out each time, and you set your adjustments by screwing in the screw back and forth, lock it down wherever you want it, and you set it up using a scale. I've got a digital scale that I use now, but you can use the old balance beams and so forth. But point is that you set this thing up, and then it will dispense the powder. All right, now on our press, we've got our cartridge over here in the third position, and that's where it's going to get powder put into it, and that's going to happen when it comes up against that nozzle right there. Now let's back off, and I'll show you something that will look somewhat familiar now. There is the powder measure, similar to the red one I was showing you, mounted up on top. Just like the red one, it's got an adjustable drum in there with the adjustment screw, and it's been preset so that I'm putting out 5.1 grains of SR 4756. The difference is, instead of a handle on it, that's been replaced by this linkage deal, and it's kind of neat. So when the cartridge goes up, as you'll see here, watch what happens now. There, see, it operates up and it dispenses the powder, and then when we come down, the case now has powder in it, and it goes around to the fourth position. What I can do is I can, it's got a spring that holds it into place. I don't have enough fingers here. And we'll put this thing down here, and then we come over. Aha! And we look down in there. You can see that it's got powder. I trust you can see that. Yeah. There are those little flakes. So it has powder. It's about half full. And that's good. That's a bulky powder. It fills up the case. You don't want a lot of empty room rattling around down in there. Now we're almost done. The only thing now is we'll put our bullet in place, and you can see that it's just perched up there. It's not particularly straight. It's pretty close. Doesn't hurt for it to be fairly straight. But what it's going to do is go up into a die. Oh, I wish I could be steadier. And there's a sleeve that it fits into. So it goes up inside, and when we push as far as we can, oonk, all right, and then we come back, and now the bullet has been seated. So there it is, and it's been adjusted. We have a screw on top that we can turn back and forth that adjusts for the depth of the bullet so that it's in there at the correct depth, and we get that out of the reloading manuals and knowing exactly what it needs to be. And then the last step is this is something to, let me set this down right here. This is something to take this cartridge and make it more reliable. The bullet is pressed in there. It's being held by a pretty good bit of tension of just the case itself. And when we drop it down into our little gauge here, we put it down into our gauge, it just drops very nicely. So it's a good cartridge. It also doesn't, it shouldn't protrude beyond the end. It looks long. Have I messed with something here? We take our caliper. It should be 135 to 125. Yeah, 135. Okay, we're good. All right, yeah, that is perfect. All right, so the thing is in there, but what it's not is it's not crimped. It doesn't have any kind of pinch on the end, and that's the last step. We're going to run it into yet another die. You figured this out ahead of time, I'm sure, and get it in there, and then that die will just simply give it a pinch on the end when it goes up into that. It's kind of a tight fit, and that clunk, you can feel it, and you can't even see it, honestly, but it's there, and it makes it where it gives it a better grip. The bullet won't move in or out when it's being when they're in the magazine. When you got a bunch of them in the magazine and you're shooting, then the ones that are waiting to be shot are being subjected to recoil, and so that can cause the bullets to walk out toward the front, and as the gun jerks back, the bullet tends to lag behind. It'll pull it loose from the bullet, and so crimping ensures that that bullet stays right where it should be. Also, when the bullet is feeding into the chamber, if it bumps into anything, it won't drive the bullet back down into the case. So a proper crimp is very important. And that's the finished round. And again, we check it. It drops down in there perfectly. We know we got one that's going to function and fire. And there it is. We'll shoot those soon. Thanks for watching.